Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios in a beautiful, beautiful day, late September 2022, from the Space Coast of Florida. And I am delighted and honored to be joined in the studios today by Michael Diamond, who is coming to us from Stockholm. I came across Michael's work because I found this brilliant, beautiful website blog called the New Traditionalist Architecture, or something like that, if I'm mangling it. And I invited him on to talk about what he does. So, Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm always very happy to speak about the topic that I love so much.
And that's the greatest. So without me mangling any further, your mandate, tell me a bit about it. What are you doing? What's the website about? What is your passion? And where are you with it?
Well, what I do basically is that I do social advocacy for new traditional architecture and classical urbanism. It's both a wide topic and a quite slim one. If I should try to compromise it a bit, I use social media, and I've used social media now for many years to spread a message that, the built environment, the environment that we live in, that all the ugliness that we see today is a choice. It's not a necessity.
Right.
Most people today believe that we must have all this ugliness around us because of costs, because of some kind of logical reason. But there is no logical reason. Everything, if you compromise it, is just the ideology of modernism that most architects today subscribe to. So when I try to show that everything is a choice, the ugliness is a choice, and we can build beautiful today, as we did, pre-1945, if we want to. And this has, stirred up a lot on the internet, because, internet is if you have some good material, you can spread it quite easily. So what we have here now in Scandinavia, we have splinter groups called the Architecture Rebellions. Of course, they use the local languages.
Architecture Rebellion. I love that.
Yes.
That's great. And are those active, architects themselves who are, getting clients and building beautiful buildings and getting rid of the modernist trash that we've had to endure?
Yeah, so it's very much a popular uprising, because it's people that usually don't engage that much, in architecture questions, people that have other professions, but now they got a voice that we don't want an ugly built environment. Build beautiful. We don't care about, your narcissistic projects and your phony, what you say in English, when you spew words that mean nothing, all these, superlatives that they describe these strange boxes. We don't care. We want beautiful buildings. And
spewing words that mean nothing in great volume, you just described all of American politics.
Yeah, you could describe most politics.
Most politics.
Except
a beautiful
Finnish.
Built environment is far better. Not to interrupt, but it reminds me of a good friend of mine, a business partner, who studied design at university. And his great comment always in relation to these really ugly buildings that have been put up since the 1950s is that bad design costs just as much as good design. So it's not like you're saving money by building a horrible, ugly concrete box. You're not. You're still spending the money. So why does it have to be ugly? Which is, I guess, your entire mandate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I want to show people it's a choice. It's 100% a choice, because what they teach now at architecture schools, they are more or less been hijacked by modernists, and then they educate new modernists. They brainwash the students there, and now we also have an effect that only people that like these strange boxes they apply, to architect schools. Is that they have some kind of depth. They understand the ugliness. They
understand the ugliness. That's beautiful.
We lay people are too simple-minded. We are too shallow. And
way too shallow. I don't understand why that big black concrete box without any windows is beautiful. You're right. I'm very shallow.
Yes, you're not enlightened enough. So it's it's very much the fairy tale. The emperor's new clothes.
Right.
Because if you haven't gone to architect school, you just see, but that's just an ugly box. I see no depth in it. oh, but you don't understand. You must be enlightened. You must be educated to like what you instinctively think is just ugly.
Right.
So this has been very successful in the Scandinavian countries. Very, very successful.
Well,
So
why
now
do you think that is? Why do you think that has been so successful? That to be taught that what you see in front of you, you can't believe your lying eyes. It's really gorgeous, even though it's really ugly. Why do you think that succeeded?
It succeeded because of, culture. We are all, social creatures, so we adapt to what others think. If you apply to architecture school and you have a different opinion, I like to draw these beautiful classical buildings, and everyone and your professor says that you're wrong, your student says that you're wrong, you get socially ostracized, you're not invited to all the nice parties, well, you will conform or you will quit. So they hijack the profession, and then we live with the end result. And they did another thing that they have been very successful. They have shut the mouth of political and public criticism. Because their favorite tactic is to mention Hitler all the time. It's like, the classical, the first one.
Because he was in favor of neoclassicism, and therefore anyone in favor of a neoclassical design must be a Nazi.
Yes,
that's exactly. A bit of a stretch. That's a bit of a stretch.
It's a very much a bit of a stretch, because the founding fathers preferred classical architecture. All the great monuments that you have in the US, they are very, 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 very inspired by Greco-Roman classicism.
Right.
The White House and those buildings. But now they try to put it, because also Hitler had opinions about architecture. So therefore, if a politician dare to open his mouth, but this is hideous, then he's like Hitler. And this has worked.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That is a big win for absurd propaganda.
Yes. So by scaring everyone in the public and politicians to have an opinion, they have been able, to just go on until the arrival, I would say, of social media.
So we live in ugly cities, mainly because architecture students want to go to the good parties with pretty girls or boys. And if they don't conform to believing that ugly boxes are beautiful, they don't get to go to the good parties. So basically, if we could just get kind of a program to let neoclassical adherents date better, we'd all get a better built environment. So you're really kind of building Bumble for architecture.
Yeah, look, that would be an amazing idea, because we have discussed it, here in Sweden. How should make people, all these modernist architects that really want to make something beautiful, how should we make them dare to exit? You need like an exit program from, like terrorists and such. You don't
deprogramming.
Yeah, deprogramming. You can leave modernism and still keep your face, because it's also very similar, to communism. In 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, think of all the people that all their lives had believed in communism and suddenly woke up that, oh, everything that I strived for all my life was a lie.
Yeah, tough. It's tough to swallow, right?
Yeah, it's
lived your entire life, and now someone says, "Oh, no. Every single thing you've ever believed was a lie. You've wasted your life. Welcome to freedom."
Yeah.
Freedom doesn't feel so good, maybe, if you're already 60 and you spent your entire life in a lie.
Yeah. So that's the situation we have for the majority of modernist architects. If they stop believing in this lie, they're telling that all their lives, all their careers have been totally meaningless. They only create the ugliness and destruction.
Wow. So you're going to create existential angst and deep misery amongst the few, which arguably they deserve, because they gave us these horribly ugly buildings to look at. So perhaps it's karmic retribution.
It's very much karma retribution. And jokingly, what we're trying to do, what we are achieving here in Scandinavia, especially in Sweden and Norway, is, opposite social
ostracism, right?
Ostracism.
Yeah.
So if you're an architect and you go to a party, the first thing people will say to you, oh, you like ugly boxes. you will get like mean comments and everything because of your profession. So in that way, we want to make them, lean towards the classical, because it will not, it will not be nice to be an architect in Sweden.
So let's bully adherents of modern architecture until they see the wisdom of actually building pretty buildings again.
Yeah,
that's a little thuggish too, but okay, in a good cause.
More or less, that's one way, and the other is, of course, educating people that want to be classical architects, because there are always, there's never been so much talent in the world as there is now. So if we can only find, if we only tell young people you can become a classical architect, then there will be many that rise to the challenge, and we will get new talent. We will get new people that are able to create, all the wonders that we admire today, and we go to cities and we photograph,
Sure.
Why couldn't we?
Here's a rather serious question, because I can always, make fun of architectural students at parties all day long. That sounds fun.
But it's true.
But it's true. It's a good social dynamic. It's actually it's a very good insight. Very true. It's like modern academia in general is mainly groupthink. So I get that. But this is also kind of a different thing, because unlike, say, forcing painters to paint canvases of beautiful mountain valleys in a realistic idiom, once again, as opposed to abstraction. The difference here is that architecture, it's a business. It requires the person who is paying the architect to also have an opinion and be the driver. At the end of the day, the customer is right. Whoever is writing the check will drive the end result. So where in here is there kind of the public education about architectural history, developmental styles? Because you can change the architecture schools all you want, but if the clients are still asking for ugly gray boxes, they're going to keep building ugly gray boxes. So as part of your mandate or part of your advocacy, kind of getting the public more knowledgeable about the process by which architecture gets built. Is that part of what you do?
Yes, and also I'm very happy that you mentioned this, because this, the buyer of architecture, what they buy depends on three things. And of course, it's the modernist ideology's fault to begin with. We can say that. And the reason I say that is because modernist architects introduced relativism into our culture. So what is beautiful is subjective. If you're a developer, and I do not criticize developers, developer has always been the same, and they should be this character. They are profit maximizing.
Of course.
Yeah. And they was that 100 years ago as well, when they built these lavish palaces, they were still profit maximizing. They've always been, and they should be. That's their business. But if you tell them that beauty is subjective, well, why should I not build a gray, ugly box and earn a few extra bucks?
Right. Well, that's the point. Is are there demonstrable differences in the cost to build the type of architecture that you prefer versus an ugly gray box? Or is it really, as my old colleague said, good and bad design cost about the same? So there must be an economic choice that they're making. Do they feel that additional ornamentation will cost more and they're not going to get paid for it?
This is a wide subject, but I will try to deal with all the components of it. So it is, of course, the classical tradition, creating a classical facade is not more expensive. Of course, if you use marble and expensive materials, it will be, a little more costly, but not that much. The facade is still a very, very small part of the overall, building budget.
Right.
So you can make a beautiful box if you divide it according to the classical tradition. You have a baseline. You put the windows in part symmetries. You have a building that, the upper part, the windows get smaller, so you get like a logical way. Our mind can read the building very easily. We get tickled by it, but at the same time we can read it, so we feel secure. We always, when we look around, we always read our environment. But addressing the question again, so can it be profitable to build classical? Yes, of course, it can be profit maximizing to build classical. And that's why many developers that have discovered this do it again and again and again. You have it in the US. You have large firms with hundreds of people that only build like classical buildings because it's profit maximizing. Okay, let's say that it costs 15% more, but you can sell it for 100% more.
Right.
So
it's all elastic in terms of what supply and demand will give you and how many inputs are, of course.
So, but that's of course, the luxury segment. They will build classical as much as they want, and that is profit maximizing for them. What is interesting if you can build beautiful for the middle class and even the lower classes, and the answer to that is yes, you can, but because the margins are smaller there,
it's harder.
Then
harder to justify when
it's hard to justify if you're only profit maximizing, as the companies should be. I don't criticize them for being profit maximizing, but let's say that if there wasn't relativism in our culture that the modernists introduced, then they couldn't get away with it. Then people would demand, of course, a building must be beautiful. They couldn't hide just saying, oh, it's just taste, you think this ugly gray box is ugly, I think it's beautiful, and you can't argue because taste is just subjective. So as much as we demand a lot, I don't know how building regulations are in the US in general.
Savage and based on bribes.
Okay, good.
The usual.
Similar to Sweden. But let's say if I move in a new apartment in Sweden, I accept there to be electricity and I accept there to be heating. I accept there to be running water.
Right.
This have cost extra for the developer, but I wouldn't accept anything else. And building by building regulation, you must have it.
Right. So it would be very disturbing to move into an apartment and find out you had no water or electricity.
Yeah. And in Swedish apartments, we also demand to have kitchen appliances.
Right.
Fridge. It's not just an empty shell. We have kitchen appliances. We also expect to have a common laundry room. If you have been in an apartment building, a common laundry room in the basement.
Right.
So we have a lot of demands in our functional demands in our culture, and the building companies apply to them, and they still make a profit.
Yeah.
So they can build beautiful buildings for middle class and lower class and still make a profit. No problem at all. So it's all about the relativism, and then of course you also have the problem with municipalities, because architects are mostly modernist, but also at the municipalities they are staffed by both modernist architects and modernist with different functions. So in many times they will.
It sounds like a pervasive architectural abuse cult.
Yes, it is. It is.
It's really unnerving, but it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah. They would deny projects. Yeah, sorry, because I'm very passionate about this, as you noticed. They would deny projects if they are classical.
That's crazy. So a developer or an owner wants to build a building and has found an architect to design the building to his or her wishes, and it's got lovely classical lines. And the municipality will take it upon themselves to not allow that person to build what he or she wants with their own money.
Yes. So we have a situation now in many municipalities. Regulations are different from country to country, but in general, many cities have building codes.
Yep.
So in many European municipalities, because the municipalities are staffed by the building engineers and such that are all modernists, they will deny you if you want to build a new classical building. Wow. So I have a friend, because Europe is quite small. The US is a continent, and so for me it's now traveling to another country. It's like for you, like traveling to another state.
Yep.
So
which I can't stand doing, because Florida is the only rational state in the whole union. But go ahead.
Yeah, I won't say anything about US politics. But
good call.
Because it's so infected, so I don't want to touch it with a stick even.
But it's all but the common thread is the infection in US politics goes right back to the modernist the desire to enforce relativism on
Yes.
society. So you can't
Yes.
claim universal values. You can't claim objective truth because all they want to do is play with play with words divorced from reality in order to
Yes.
control you.
Yes, that's exactly what they're doing. Now I talked enough politics, so I don't dare
Go
to say
on.
anything
No
more.
politics. Go on. It's all about the
But
architecture
yes,
rebellion. Go for it.
yeah, but the relativism is there. So I have a friend in Tallinn, Estonia, that is on the other side of the Baltic Sea to Sweden, and he's a classical architect. So a developer tried him, built a house. It's sold in like an apartment house then. It's sold in record time.
Right.
The municipality, since Estonia got independent from the Soviet Union, never had an apartment house sold out so quickly. So the developer got very happy and built another one, and then another one, and wanted to build a fourth one. But then the architecture establishment of Estonia, of course, they are all modernists, they sent a protest letter.
Wow.
So they forbade for building more new classical buildings, apartment houses, because it could confuse people. Because
so
maybe
they're protecting people from architectural confusion. How nice is
yes.
That? What is architectural confusion?
Because they thought that people would believe that these buildings would be old and not new.
That's fabulous.
Yes.
Wow.
So these kind of things, they try to find, because they know that they are wrong, so they try to forbid all kinds of opposition.
That's one of the most curious attacks on freedom of expression I've ever heard. You're not allowed to build a building that would have been called beautiful for 2,000 years in Europe from the Romans because someone might think it was built before 1945 and therefore we can't do that.
Yes.
Did that fly? Did they, in Tallinn, did they listen to that absurdity?
The politicians did. So they forbade him from building. So he can build. The developer
One of
is
the
allowed to
craziest
build.
stories I've ever heard.
Yeah. So the developer is allowed to build new apartments, but one must see that they were built in our time, as they express it. So he must build an ugly box because he's not allowed to build a classical building.
Can't he build a beautiful classical building and put the date of construction at the top?
No, on the all other buildings they did. So they put the date of construction. They put 2015
That's
and
crazy.
2016.
Is there an appeals process for this stupidity? Or is their ruling absolute? Like, what would they do if he built another building? Tear it down because it was attractive?
No, in the end, they can put fines. They all have all the the legal and we are very law abiding. Had it been Spain or Southern Europe, they wouldn't have cared. But here in Northern Europe, we are very law abiding. And so if we get a fine, we'll pay it, and then we'll get out of business. So it's and they do it in all countries. They try to forbid opposition. They try to denounce you as a Nazi, and they try to relativize the subject of beauty. So that's the mess we are in. So
this is your fight. This is what you are trying to. One person at a time, one blog view at a time. Thousands of people will watch this interview. All of that is to change. What to let people permit themselves to enjoy classical architecture?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
That's one of the best missions I've ever heard.
Yeah, because you're allowed to believe your eyes.
You're allowed to believe your eyes. That's going to be the title of this episode. You're allowed to believe your eyes. That's fabulous.
Yeah, but everyone instinctively, most people know that building is beautiful, that building is ugly. You go to Venice for a reason, right?
Exactly. You go to Venice for a reason. You don't want modernist boxes replacing the buildings on the Grand Canal.
No. So it's very simple. It's very intuitive because it's biological. It's not that we were taught to if you go down to break what is beauty, it's different fractal patterns to the mind of nature. That is one. The other is readability, because we are savannah creatures, so we always we stand on our two legs and we read our environment, not only for danger, we read our environment constantly.
Right.
So the classical buildings, they tickle our imagination, but at the same time, they are readable. You can instantly recognize patterns on the building, what is bottom, what is top, what is midsection. All this makes us calm.
Kind
Not
of
that
genetically comfortable. We have
yeah,
evolved over centuries and millennia to find those proportions pleasing and natural to the eye.
yes, and they are readable. You can instantly see what it is. You can find patterns. You can find these things that you don't think I'm stressed or I'm calm. But you become calm and you become stressed when you cannot read your built environment. Also, it's about scale. This modern building can be too large, too huge. We don't like these scales. Instinctively, we don't like these scales. We want, a little bit more humble. We feel safer in, if you keep it to like, let's say 4 or 5 or 6 story building. I know this might sound strange. In the US, you have so much skyscrapers.
Yeah, but that's only in major cities, and for very specific reasons. The land is so valuable that if you can put a massive building on it, and there's a beauty to that too, right? Having lived on the 30th floor of a building in Manhattan overlooking the river, that had its own beauty to it. The building itself was not gorgeous, but the living inside of it was phenomenal.
Yeah, I won't argue against that. But generally, if you keep it to 5 or 6 stories, it makes our environment more readable. People may like high rises. I don't, because I want you to be connected to the street. If you live on the 30th floor, you have a spectacular view.
Yep.
But what is your connection to the street? If you look down,
nothing. It's great watching people look like ants. It's wonderful.
Yeah,
it's a very godlike feeling.
Yeah. So it's not, you cannot look out and shout to your kids playing down there. They won't hear you if you're on the 30th floor.
Correct. And we tried that. There was a playground right below us once, and I tried to get their attention. Pointless. So you're right. Utterly not human in scale, without a question.
Yeah. So keep it human in scale, and we like certain kind of proportions because we don't want to feel dwarfed. There's a difference between being, humbled and impressed by a building and being dwarfed by a building. If certain scales make us feel tiny, and we don't like those environments, so we try to, flee from them. We don't hang out there that much.
What's interesting when you say that about kind of the consilience between the natural world, biology, how we perceive the built environment, right? With the exception of the redwood sequoias in the Pacific Northwest of the US, there are huge trees, but they top out at 7 or 8 stories in building terms. And the sequoias are the exception to that, right? They tower like an office building. That's curious. So human experience across the world, with that one exception, has seen, looking out from the savannah, has seen that height as natural in some way.
Yes.
Huh.
I would, you can go in depth with the science, but basically we read our built environment. We want certain scales. We want to feel secure. We want, when you choose where you should sit in a classroom, if you're a bit nervous, you often choose, so you have a wall. You sit the first back, so you have a wall at your back,
right?
Because then you feel safe, because then at least your back is protected. So there's so much, this, thinking in our minds. We don't actively think about it. It's subconscious. So this affects us and stresses us in our built environment if our built environment don't consider this. Okay, now we have strayed a bit, from the
No, straight right on. What is the sort of core message you would like to deliver? If you wanted my listeners to take away, one kind of core idea of how they would pursue this, researching this more themselves, if they're interested, like what is your advice to them? How do they get a grip on this? Both for, I imagine your advocacy is not just intellectual; it's policy driven. Right, people can begin to take control of their own built environments in municipalities and the like.
Well, I do it. I can tell how I do it. So that affects people. Very, very simple. I post regularly on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Reddit. There are more channels, but these are the one that I
But for
focus
those
on.
of us who've been thrown off all three for being intelligently outspoken, is there just a website they can go
Yes,
to?
there's newthread.org also. You can find this. If you will not be banned there. I don't ban people. Even if you are modernist and disagree with me, I don't ban people. I don't do that.
How enlightened of you. You don't censor opposing views. Are you sure you're living in the 21st century?
I know what you mean. Okay, I won't talk anything politics, because
I was just
the
talking
reason why,
censorship. I was just talking censorship.
yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
The reason why I'm so sensitive to talk politics is because they want to label, as if you do advocacy for classical tradition, they want to label you politically.
Oh, so that's a very serious point. That's not just me being.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So because my advocacy is basically is that the classical tradition in itself has no political leaning.
Yeah, it's value neutral in terms of politics. It's just
individual styles.
beautiful built environment. Period.
Yeah, individual styles within the classical tradition can of course have political leanings, but that's individual styles, not the tradition itself. So if I talk too much about politics, then I will 50% of people will not listen to me because
sure,
brand.
everyone can blame me for that. I'm trying to
Yeah.
jokes about politics constantly. Michael is solely concerned with architecture.
Now, of course, I like every human, I have my political beliefs, and I read politics every day, but that is not my mission.
Right.
I want
it's also
everyone,
not relevant to this, right? It's also
I want everyone to embrace classical tradition. I want left, right, green, blue.
We can all have political arguments in more attractive buildings.
Yeah, exactly. So when we reach the conclusion we should build in classical tradition, then we can fight which style we should build in. That's the noble fight. When we reach there, I will, and then I won, then I will quit, and do something else.
That's great. So you want to get us to a more enlightened architectural understanding so that we can then have really vicious fights about types of classical architecture.
Yeah, then the left and right and all the other dimension of politics will fight which style we should build in. Right. Everyone will agree it should be beautiful. It will be built in the classical tradition, but then some will prefer this style and others prefer that style, like it was before, because nothing is new under the sun.
No.
One thing with modernism is that they believe that we are some kind of new human being. We are not. We are the same as we've been for 2,000 years. So
every teenager invents sex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. It's something like that with modernists. So if we take, I make many examples close to home. I make Budapest in Hungary in the beginning of the 1900s. You had many different ethnic communities. So for the Hungarians, it was very important to build in Hungarian and national romanticism.
Right.
Their heritage, their ancestors that rode from the steppes 1,000 years ago. But so it's all buildings,
right.
somehow.
This is how an arch should look.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have had the very large Jewish minority in Budapest. They were excluded from being Hungarian, but Hungary at the time was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So they became Austrian Hungarians. So they preferred to build architecture styles that were artistic, but didn't have like a national tone to it. So they prefer to build Art Nouveau. So it's almost that when you walk in Budapest, you can always say, "Oh, there used to live Jews in that building," because it's Art Nouveau.
I never thought of that. That's absolutely awesome. You're right. You can look at the ethnic geography or historically of the city from that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and you can do it in many cities in Europe because of competing nationalism. It was a quite toxic period. We don't want that back. But everyone was in throats with each other. So everyone rivaled in architecture and built their revivalist, their opposition to some other group. But it created beautiful cities, very, very interesting and beautiful cities.
Yes,
so
it did. That's fascinating. Now, do you have any sort of kind of final thoughts for people? Because I'm going to urge them to go check out the website, which is phenomenally both beautiful and really interesting in terms of depth.
I would recommend people, no matter your political leanings, if you want easy consumption, go to Twitter. And yes, this is self-promoting, and check out my Twitter account, because what I do, I don't post my political beliefs. I don't care about that other people should have them.
I think everyone would be surprised to find out that architecture is political. I think most people, maybe not Europeans, Americans, I think would be very surprised to find out that architecture can be political.
Yeah, so what I do is just a simple one picture with a short tweet text before and after. So people can see with their own eyes how you can build beautiful. You're allowed to like it, and you can have it in your place too. So
that's great.
Yeah, so it's very, very simple. And if you see all these examples, it will start, things in your mind. You will realize that, I live in this town, this city, and they're building something new now there. Why couldn't it look more like this that I saw on Twitter that they did in that town that is neighboring?
Right.
So you get inspired, and
that's great.
You connect with other people. So join the Twitter account. Just see for yourself. It's not long text or anything. If you want, support, with advocacy or how you should argue, fine, I'm here, you can contact me. Otherwise, just look at the pictures and imagine how your place would look.
Thank you. That is one of the sort of best, clearest, for the public good conversations we've had on this channel so far. That's phenomenal. Thank you very much. Look forward to having you back. We're gonna have a follow-up on this at some point to go through some of the political intricacies. We'll pick a city or two, maybe Budapest, something else. That would be fascinating, right? And how to read an urban landscape in terms of the political choices that informed the architectural choices. I think that'd be riveting. I didn't even know that existed until just now. So live a little, learn a little. Thanks for coming on the show, and I don't have to provide my normal admonishment today, because usually I tell my listeners to turn off the mainstream media because they're lying to them, but the mainstream media isn't telling them anything about architecture. So go check out Michael's Twitter account, and we'll put all those links below. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Okay.
Learn what Bitcoin is, how it works, and why it matters. Bitcoin 101, your ultimate guide to the fundamentals of blockchain.